WNST, but we're actually on to Tennessee and Nashville here this week. Luke Jones, of course, joining us now to discuss picking up the pieces of this Cleveland thing. But more than that, Luke, just picking up the pieces of the AFC North on a weekend where everybody won but you, and now this third game, and I don't know what the odds are and what Vegas would tell you on this, but third game on the road in a row, you know, that number, Vegas loves that number probably for what it is, and Tennessee licking some wounds right now. This is a little bit of a precarious time, right? Saints around the corner. I mean, you're going to wind up seeing Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks. Whatever ailed the Ravens on Sunday, they better figure it out pretty quick.
There's no question about that. And, I mean, I think it's always important to keep any win or any loss in perspective. I don't think this ruins their season in the same way that I thought. I didn't think that beating Pittsburgh automatically meant they were going 12-4. But you do look at this schedule, third straight road game. Tennessee coming off of actually a kind of a similar loss. I mean, they didn't score points, and they lost to the Buffalo Bills on Sunday, 13-12. So as much as we talk about all these high-scoring, offensive-minded games in the NFL, you know, a couple throwback games.
Well, and if the games would have ended at halftime, if everything ended at 2:30 on Sunday, everything would have been flipped. I mean, it was incredible. Cincinnati was taking an ass beating at one point, right? So and everything switched around.
No question. But, I mean, you look at the Ravens just in general, the way their schedule sets up, you kind of take some pause, and you need to be on alert, because as great as the 3-1 start was, and everyone was feeling good, and rightfully so, with the balance that they were showing, defense, good offense prior to Sunday, that can go away quickly in the matter of a couple games. And you go to Tennessee and lose, and you're 500. You see what still lies ahead in the second half. Your schedule that you have on paper, knowing that a lot can change between now and then, but you're right back in that position they were in 2 years ago, in that position they were in last year, where you're needing to either run the table or win 5 of 6 or 6 of 7 down the stretch to make the playoffs. So that's why Sunday hurt so much, because that was such a winnable game. But as you pointed out, and we've talked about this a lot, you know, it's a crazy league. There are other teams that had disappointing losses. You mentioned Cincinnati looked like they were on their way. I mean, they were losing 17-0 in the midway through the third quarter, and they end up winning by 10 points. So things can change quickly, but I think the urgency certainly needs to be there for the Ravens, because it's not getting any easier. You know, you can say what you want about the Browns. Yeah, I think they're better than they've been, obviously, because they've won 2 games compared to a combined 1 the previous.
Well, not only that, dude, they could have won 5. They were in games at the end. Yeah. I mean, they literally, if they had Justin Tucker, they'd probably be 5-0, right? If they had the best kicker in the league, right?
Right. But if you're the Ravens, I mean, you look at these games, and you know that they lost one on Sunday. They easily could have won, should have won, if their offense played anywhere close to the way it did in their first 4 games. So it's not panic time, but I think the urgency level needs to be higher, because you see how this looks. I mean, another road game, a trip to Charlotte not long from now, that's not going to be easy. So you start dropping games, and you suddenly find yourself 4-5 going into the bye week, and then, boy, you just have no margin for error the rest of the way. And the Ravens, they need to try to avoid that scenario.
He is Luke Jones. Of course, he is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at the Modell Lyrics. Steely Dan on Thursday night. I'm really looking forward to that. It's my 50th birthday week this week, so I am heavily caffeinated on the Rufo around here as well. A lot of energy needed. I got a Zeppelin experience coming on Thursday as well. So big week of music and fun. Comedy at the Modell Lyric. Mellencamp around the corner. Kansas next month. Learn all about the magic at the Modell Lyric, and I watched from afar as my wife and son took in John Mayer to benefit the Kimmel Cancer Center on Sunday night at the Modell Lyric. So cheers to John and Nicolette and everybody down there for putting on a good show with John Mayer on Sunday night. Modell Lyric, there's magic going on there as well. Charles Newsonoff and Son, since 1923, they've been doing it. True love comes in all shapes and sizes, and everyone's budget fits at Charles Newsonoff. Make sure you find them out in Parkville. They say let's grow old together. Luke, for this week and where we are, Pittsburgh smells good, right? Cincinnati came back, and as Marvin sits down and jokes with the media, hey, just the way we drew it up, and Cleveland gets a victory. The bunchiness of these games and the scoreboard watching, I think, that we're going to be taking on over the next month while we're watching games. All of these other games start to intersect a little bit, including Kansas City and New England late on Sunday night after the Ravens game's over. You know, that turns into this blockbuster game here going into Week 6, Week 7. And there are big games everywhere because the league's interesting this year, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like we always talk about this because there is some volatility early in the season. Inevitably, there's a couple teams that we think are going to be really good, and they're not. And maybe Philadelphia is that this year, even though I still wouldn't count them out with the way that NFC East looks top to bottom. And then there's the surprise teams. I mean, Kansas City, we've seen them start fast. We've seen them look really good early in the season, but it's different now because it's Patrick Mahomes compared to Alex Smith. So you look at some of these surprises, you look at some of these disappointments, and you get into the month of October, you're really starting to get some context. The season's really starting to take shape. You're getting an idea of who the really good teams are and who the really bad teams are. And then it's the 25 teams in the middle that you're still trying to figure out. But that is what makes this.
But it's always the thing you don't know, right? Like Garoppolo is probably the one story that completely changed that franchise in the same way that Andrew Luck coming back has changed Indianapolis as an opponent. I mean, I know they didn't look great on Thursday night, but they are a credible franchise when you have to play them. I mean, Green Bay's losing game, and I know we went through quarterbacks the other day, but just the fact that guys are healthy, and most of these teams, Atlanta's got issues in the second. I mean, some of these teams have struggled because of health, but not as many as maybe in recent years. So whatever they're doing, pansy up the quarterback position or keep those guys. Good. I don't want 4 franchises going down between now and Thanksgiving with one a week quarterback blown knees and all of that stuff. That's not good for the league either, and nothing changes the fortune for any of these franchises like Mahomes going down, like Watson did last year.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. I agree with the principle of wanting quarterbacks to be healthy. I think we're still seeing roughing the passers. I read an article, I think it was by Kevin Seifert on ESPN on Monday morning. I want to say roughing the passer penalties are up 70% from this time last year. I mean, that's significant. And I like the idea of protecting quarterbacks. At the same time, we've seen, maybe not with the Ravens per se, but we've seen examples around the league where there have been some really questionable, at best, kind of calls that have really shifted the outcome or the momentum of a game. So it's tough. I mean, we talked about this even with some of the helmet-to-helmet stuff that really started to come into light 6, 7, 8 years ago, that there was going to be some collateral damage there. There were going to be some unfortunate developments. But to your point, we have seen a league that, knock on wood, has been healthy in the quarterback department other than Garoppolo, and that was he actually hurt his knee before taking a hit on the sideline.
Well, I guess everybody has a chance when their quarterback's decent enough, and as we pointed out earlier, the pool has sort of middled out a little bit because you don't say, well, Mariota can't win, Newton can't win, Jameis Winston can't win. Maybe we're getting to that point with the kid in Miami at this point, right? That maybe that guy's jumped the shark a little bit, but there are a lot of quarterbacks here that you wouldn't say, well, that guy can't win a Super Bowl at this point, but that franchise can't win this year if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt, if Joe Flacco gets hurt, if Phillip Rivers gets hurt, any of those guys. So, for me, part of the good part of the league this year and why I think it's good. Look, the officiating, we can get into that. We can get into the bad things going on. But I think the league is interesting. I'm looking forward to getting on a plane and going to Nashville this weekend and watching football and watching Sunday Night Football. I think that there are enough credible teams, and we're not seeing an awful brand of football by and large, given that there's less coaching and all of that going on. And I think the games have been relatively competitive and interesting. Whereas all summer long, everyone who loved baseball, including you, bitched about how bad baseball was this year. I think football's kind of taking a better turn as we're going into Week 6 for involvement and interest. I think there's a lot to be interested in, and not a lot of these collateral stories about the knee and Kaepernick, although I think blackballing a player should be a big story. I think we are talking about football right now, and that's a good thing for me, and an interesting football, and a bunch of teams that I still don't know who's going to be in Atlanta when I get there in February, because I can give you 20 names right now.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, and I agree with you. I mean, the number of star players that went down with injuries, I mean, quarterbacks kind of headlined it, but there were a number of great skill players, a number of high-profile players who at this point last year had already been either lost for the season or lost for a large chunk of the season. And you never know. I mean, all it takes is one or two Sundays for that narrative to change drastically. But you're right. And I think what's interesting with what you mentioned, I mean, and you know me, I'm a numbers guy. One of the big things that you can look at tends to be a pretty decent indicator of future performance is point differential. And you even look at like a team like Buffalo, who, my God, looks so bad. And they're 2-3. Now, they're minus 55, and I still think they're going to be, if not the worst team in the league, one of the worst teams in the league this year, but they've managed a way to win 2 games. So it does speak to how volatile, how unpredictable this league is, and it becomes that much better when every team has a quarterback who's either established, and look, there's plenty of teams who don't have established quarterbacks, but I feel like most of those teams at this point are at least trotting out someone who is a maybe, you know, whether it's a rookie, whether it's a second-year guy, whereas last year, I mean, just look at the quarterbacks the Ravens played last year.
Deshaun Kaiser, right?
I mean, you had so many guys, and even Kaiser was a rookie. I mean, it became very apparent that he wasn't going to be a franchise guy, but some of these teams that were just playing with, you know, with an E.J. Manuel at you know, when Carr was out a couple games, and go down the list of just pure backup quarterbacks. Brett Hundley, who the Ravens shut out in Green Bay. The number of quarterbacks like that who were playing where you just say, this is either a complete backup, a complete never going to be, never was, whereas right now I think you go through the list, and look, there's been some bad quarterback play. I don't want to misrepresent it, but I feel like most teams in this league are either playing a rookie that they invested an early pick in, you know, Josh Allen in Buffalo comes to mind right away, or they have their starter. With San Francisco being the example, the one exception to that rule. So it's made for a better product, and I think you do get a more unpredictable Sunday to Sunday in the NFL where you can have Buffalo going to Minnesota and crush the Vikings like they did a couple weeks ago. You can have some of those outcomes, and you know, some people say it leads to parity, and look, there are a lot of 3-2 and 2-3 teams right now, but you know, that's not exactly a shock. And you know, through 5 weeks, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I definitely want to see some separation at some point. You know, I don't think everyone wants to just see a bunch of 9-7 teams in the playoffs, but at this still early juncture, I'm okay with seeing those 3-2 and 2-3 teams, because that means a lot of teams are still right in the thick of this. I mean, right now you have Indianapolis, Oakland, and you mentioned the Colts are more interesting, at least with Andrew Luck. The Raiders have been a dumpster fire. The Giants are looking pretty hopeless at this point. Those are your 1-4 teams, and Atlanta, and you know, we already mentioned San Fran's out of it. But you know,
Atlanta is about injuries, right? I mean, if we're going to break it down,
just been ravaged. So
I mean, it's not like they're a crappy franchise with a crappy offseason. I mean, San Francisco was always sort of wobbling before Garoppolo got there, but I mean, it shows you how much hope you can get when you get a good quarterback, right?
Yeah, and I left the Cardinals out. They're playing a rookie quarterback right now.
Who's playing like a rookie? You know, throwing for 80 yards and 120 yards, not what we saw out of Baker Mayfield, which, I think bringing it full circle back to where we are, the real fear in the division should be that if Cleveland gets a quarterback and they have Denzel Ward and all this other stuff going on around them, they're not going to be an easy out, and I don't think there's going to be any embarrassment at the end of the year that you lost to Cleveland. I do think it's a tough loss against the division now where, you played all the road games. I'll get that out of there.
Right.
But how this team plays on the road, it's just an unbelievable difference, right? And I always ask Coach Billick that, right? Why is the road so hard? And then you just rewind the tape and watch the Ravens play at Cleveland, not just this year, any year.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. And what's frustrating is that this came on the heels of what they did in Pittsburgh. I mean, if they had lost in Pittsburgh, and first of all, if they had lost in Pittsburgh, I don't think there was any way they would have lost to the Browns on Sunday. That's what I believe. But it just felt like that was such a breakthrough for the Ravens, and then to lay the egg that they did. And look, I'll give the Browns credit. I think the Browns are clearly a lot better than they've been the last couple years, which was not a high bar exactly, but I feel like they're a team that can upset some teams this year. They're a team that absolutely could spoil. I'm not. If we're going to sit here and say the Browns win 6 games, I'm not going to be surprised whatsoever by that. I'd be surprised probably if they win many more than that, but it just speaks to where they are, and if Baker Mayfield is at the very least a competent quarterback, which he already looks like that. But if he becomes better than that, but look out. You could see the Browns get really good really fast. I mean, it doesn't take long if you find that guy. I mean, look what happened with the Colts, both times, with Peyton Manning and with Andrew Luck. I mean, they were really terrible, and then they draft that guy, and a year later, they're a viable contender. So it doesn't take long if you find that guy. But
the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl, right? Because they found that guy. They're the Week 5 darlings, which always concerns me, right? I mean, how many years has the Week 5 darling not held water in January? But right now, they look to be the best team in the league.
Yeah, the Rams and Kansas City. I mean, you have to give
fair
the Chiefs.
enough.
Yeah, you have to give their props. I mean, but
let's see how they do with the foghorn comes on. Let's see how the kid holds up there, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, to talk about a statement that can be made right there. I mean, and look, and Patrick Mahomes came back to earth a little bit. Bad weather conditions that he played in on Sunday in KC, but what an opportunity for him! What an opportunity for that team when you look at where they are. You look at where the Patriots have kind of been, where they've come out of it a little bit here, but and certainly having Josh Gordon in the picture is pretty interesting for them if his head is on right, which I think is a big question. Always going to be a question given his history. But if Kansas City goes to Foxborough next Sunday night and wins 6-0 and doing that to the Patriots on the road, then yeah, I think you'd be foolish not to buy into that big time. But, you look at the Chiefs, you look at the Rams, and it's early, and plenty can happen, but you have to be really impressed. And both teams with a young quarterback, Goff 3rd year, Mahomes 2nd year, and it does speak to how exciting it can be for a franchise. I mean, Kansas City, the book on them has been what? Good starts, plateau, Alex Smith not going to lead you to the promised land. And that was...
And before that, it was Montana and Marty Schottenheimer and, Lynn Elliott. And, I mean, there's a long, rich pageantry of Chiefs and Vikings failures, right? Like the Eagles until last year, but these are these franchises that have these incredible fan base, incredible legacy,
right,
incredible players, and just have never climbed the mountain. And I mean, you saw the residue of what was left over in Minnesota when they thought they were going to win. Boy, nobody would get more lubed up about a 9-1 football team than Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas for that matter.
No question. But the knock on them, and they've had some good teams in recent years. It was always, is Alex Smith going to get you over the hump? Is that defense good enough to get you over the hump? And the answer was no.
Elvis Gerback will get. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring that
Steve
up.
Bono had a really dynamic regular season 1 year.
Steve DeBerg, baby, my all-time favorite, Steve DeBerg.
yeah, but but that's a chance for them to not just improve to 6-0, but really make a heck of a statement to just lay it out there very clearly. When you look at the rest of the AFC specifically, the AFC North, Cincinnati's looks really good, but everyone else has kind of just been good or okay.
By the way, that was a hell of a win for Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Going into the locker room for Chile at halftime, down 14-0 to the Aquamarines, right? I mean, to come out and just lay the wood down in the fourth quarter of a game where I'm sure the fan base there, and you weren't watching it, I wasn't watching it, but I'm sure at halftime that. If I would have gone down to urinate with the great unwashed in Cincinnati, can you imagine that scene at halftime there with the fans losing 14-0 like that?
Yeah, totally. And I'll say this, and give them credit. Hey, they came back and won. They also had some good fortune in the fourth quarter. I don't know if you saw Michael Johnson's interception return. I mean, it was a pinball kind of situation. I mean, that's luck. I mean, that's being in the right place at the right time. And then they had a fumble return to make it a 10-point lead. So, hey, I mean, give their defense.
Dude, I don't think anybody's any better than anyone else. It's more just about being resilient at the end, which is why I give Baker Mayfield high marks, because that was a gritty effort. That's the kind of game you win. And, when Flacco gets up and is pumping his guns after beating Denver and all excited about it, it's because, it's hard to do that. And
sure.
Week to week, it's very hard to do that. And I think the disappointment we saw from Joe, even, rolling on referees after the game. Harbaugh was chippy after the game, didn't want to talk much. For Crabtree, who's not sort of cut of the cloth, in the Raven way, a more of a mercenary outside guy to be the GOAT. And I don't mean the Michael Jordan kind of GOAT. I mean the old-fashioned GOAT. I don't know when the hell we turn that phrase around. These millennials, a GOAT is a dog. A GOAT is bad. A GOAT is not the greatest of all. Call it the greatest of all time. But a GOAT is what Michael Crabtree was, what your kicker is when he misses a field goal. So anyway, but
GOAT,
get off my lawn.
It's lowercase letters compared to all caps.
I don't know. Punctuation, these kids today with the text and all. Get off my lawn.
Get
off my lawn. So anyway, I would just say, for where we are in the division right now, this is a little nerve-wracking, and it really is about outlasting. And everything was gloom and doom in Pittsburgh, right? We went in there, we beat them up, we left. And then they, Ben can't get along with the wide receiver, and then they're doing all the smiley smile. I'll tell you what, I worry for that franchise because it feels like a drama queen franchise a little bit to me. There's just a lot of diva going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers, right?
Well, and Ben Roethlisberger's the oldest of the veteran quarterbacks in the division. I mean, we've talked so much about Flacco and Lamar Jackson and when and if that transition might take place, but Roethlisberger's older than Flacco, so you kind of look at this and you say, okay, well, Cleveland has Baker Mayfield. Maybe the Ravens have their quarterback of the future with Lamar Jackson. That's yet to be determined. And Andy Dalton's considerably younger than Roethlisberger, and he's a few years behind Flacco for that matter. So, but it is a case where if you're Pittsburgh, you can clearly see the power in this division shifting. I mean, it's been Pittsburgh and everyone else the last couple of years. I mean, the Ravens have been there, but then fallen back at the very end. Cincinnati took a couple steps back the last couple of years. They weren't a very good football team at all. I mean, at this point last year, we were talking about Marvin Lewis being fired, and would continue to talk about that until they beat the Ravens in Week 17. But I think if you're the Steelers, you have to sit there and Ben's getting older. Le'Veon Bell is going to be out the door. Whether he comes back and plays for them, and they on the surface play kumbaya for the final 10 weeks or whatever it's going to be. There's very clearly a shift going on there, and the Bengals are better, the Ravens are better, Cleveland's clearly better. So it's hard to kind of look at this division, and I'll give Cincinnati the nod just because they're 4-1, and they deserve that being 4-1, but all four teams, positive point differential. So it kind of tells you none of these teams are bad. And we've talked about it. Cleveland could be, they could be undefeated if they made a couple more plays in each of those games. And now, you can't just do that because could have said the same thing about the 2015 Ravens, and they ended up going 5-11. So many of these games do come down to one or two plays, but Cleveland is finding a way to make one or two plays rather than completely shoot themselves in the foot as they did year after year after year. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and you're right about Pittsburgh. They got to be looking at this thing, even after winning on Sunday and getting themselves back to 500. They have to be looking at the rest of this division and thinking, wow, we're going to have a hell of a dogfight on our hands compared to what the last couple years have been.
Well, when you beat Cleveland up for 20 years, you don't spend a whole lot of time thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice to be in the AFC East?
Yeah.
And we could beat up on the Dolphins and the Bills and, Patriots maybe not so, but, I mean, the Patriots sort of mirror the Steelers more in that way. And in this division, Cincinnati, it's changed a lot during Marvin's era, but they were doormats as well. This was a nice place to be around the turn of the century. So nice that the Tennessees and the Jacksonville were doing some nice eating as well.
Yeah, I mean, this division, you've always had those 2 wins you could bank, right? I mean, even the years where Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cincinnati have all been tough, you always looked at Cleveland and said, that's 2 wins. And, I mean, the Ravens were 18-2 against the Browns going into Sunday's game in the John Harbaugh era. So that's as automatic as it gets. I mean, that's pretty astonishing. But that's coming to an end very clearly, and Pittsburgh found that out firsthand week 1, and the Ravens certainly learned that in week 5.
By the way, you know what's really weird? I didn't know that number. I didn't see that in the stats, and me, I'm not such a stats nerd as I get to be older. I'm more of a reading depth of knowledge than stats, and people were quoting all sorts of stats about 2015 in Cleveland, and all the Browns guys knew all the numbers of all the ineptitude, right? And I'm thinking to myself, 18-2, I don't even, and I've been at all the games, right? It feels to me like it couldn't be that lopsided because it's never comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, every time we play Cleveland, I'm on pins and needles because it's 15-13 and it's raining and we got to figure out how to kick a field goal or something. I mean, that's the way the thing's been the whole time. So as lopsided as it sounds, it never feels that way to me. I never get on the plane and go to Cleveland and we're just going to laugh our way through this. It's just because it never works out that way, no matter how bad they are.
Yeah, it's frequently ugly. I mean, even some of the games the Ravens pulled away, like last year. I mean, the late December game against Cleveland last year, I mean, that was a close game for a good portion of it. And then the Ravens pulled away late. But they rarely go to Cleveland and just blow the doors off the place and crush them. I mean, it just hasn't been that way. But and we made this point in our previous conversations, kind of breaking this game down. When the Ravens have typically had these kind of sleepwalking, workmanlike, grinding it out kind of performances, you've always counted on the Browns to have that fatal mistake, that fatal flaw that would lead to their demise. And they made mistakes, but they didn't have that fatal flaw. They didn't make that.
I mean, come on, dude. On the kick that won the game, that ball, it's miraculous it went through. I mean, right on down to winning the game, it was centimeters of a Browning kind of field goal, literally, right? But that thing right. In any other alternate universe goes doink, and, they're back to being Charlie Brown, right?
Well, but if that happened, then it would have been a tie, and I don't know if anyone would feel that much better about it.
I haven't figured out whether these ties feel like losses or not. Right now, I'll take the tie.
Yeah,
so would John Harbaugh, I think.
It's just weird. I mean, and I get it. It's better than a loss. I understand the math and the ramifications of it, but if that game had ended in a tie on Sunday, and we're sitting here trying to break down a tie, I mean. And maybe that's one reason why I never became a hockey fan, even though ties have gone away in the NHL and have for a few years now. But it's strange in that way, and I don't like the 10-minute overtime. We've talked about that before. I think it's too rushed. I think it was one of those lame player safety, eyewash kind of initiatives that really don't make a difference in the big picture. Especially when you're playing Thursday night football. I mean, come on. You're telling me you can't play an extra 5 minutes in overtime, but that's not safe for players, but you're going to continue to trudge them out there on Thursday nights. But it's just weird. It's a weird dynamic. And I will say this, though. It made me think back to the tie with the Eagles in 1997 at Memorial Stadium. I was at that game with my dad.
As was I. The Jay Graham incident, as I remember it, right?
And I believe, I feel like Vinny Testaverde may have thrown a pick from his knees in that game or something really crazy
it's
or
possible.
stupid. But the funniest thing about that game, I remember, I was sitting in the open end zone at Memorial Stadium in those bleachers that they had set up. And as we were walking out, and I was 14 years old at the time, I remember Ravens fans and Eagles fans kind of in unison all just saying, well, we both suck. And it was really funny in that way. But, yeah, that whole feeling of a tie, it's just such a strange dynamic.
Well, it came this close to happening. Yeah. Luke Jones is here. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're checking out the ROFO Rewards card. Download the app to your phone. Make sure you're using that when you're pumping your gas. You'll get your points, and your coffee will be free instead of 99 cents, which it is all month. And Justin Tucker is singing. At some point for my 50th birthday, I will sing some Royal Farms coffee, and I'll put it out on the interweb for all to enjoy. And I am willing to wear the chicken suit. So if you see Frank Schilling or Ed Stronsky, any of those guys, let him know that if Tucker can fit in the suit, I can fit in the suit. And I mean that sincerely. The BuyUToyota.com audio vault is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Don't forget, John W. Brick Foundation. The run is going on Sunday. Wim Hof is in town Saturday. Please go to jwb5k.com. Learn more about what our friends Victor and Lynn Brick have put together there for mental health awareness and for funding. Very, very important. Also, our morning newspaper brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club. The Maryland Million is next week. That is the 20th at Laurel Park. Get on down there. If you haven't been down to Laurel lately and seen all the changes, it is fantastic. Beautiful sports book down there. They have the baseball games on and some delicious wet imbibements for you to have, as well as betting on the ponies and seeing the Maryland Million. That's next week at Laurel Park. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first on our WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford, Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.